Uh-oh. I imagine there is still some performance issues to hammer out. There probably is some performance issues still for Monster Hunter. Mostly, this game is cooked 7 out of 10. Let's see. Hold on. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. There's a review on it, so I'm curious what it's about.
Oh baby, I've been waiting to talk about Monster Hunter Wilds because Capcom very generously offered me a review code for it like 3 weeks ago. And I've been
3
playing
weeks
it
ago?
a lot, and I have a lot of thoughts. But TLDW is basically just that this game is fantastic. It's really, really good. It is the sequel a lot of us were hoping for, but it's not perfect. I'll share specific examples, but the game is a bit of a technical mess, at least the version that we've been playing for review. There's all sorts of crashes, performance is pretty abysmal, even on my supercomputer with a 4090, and there's a consistent graphical bug that makes the game basically unplayable and often forces restarts. I'll show you what footage of these things I can later in the video, but I do want to also be clear that Capcom has placed a pretty strict embargo for the game, and they've done this to try and prevent leaks and spoilers for late game monsters and some of the coolest reveals that are in the game. And I totally get that. I understand why they'd want to do that, but it is frustrating that I can't show you all of the technical problems that are present here, and to a certain extent I just have to describe them and then you use your imagination. But nonetheless, at launch, I guess I can show you all of this. So if you're interested in seeing all of it, come by my Luke Stevens live channel, my second channel, and on launch day I'll show you all those clips because I'll be able to. So I guess we can do that. That being said, I am allowed to show you everything the game has to offer in the first chapter, which are things that you've probably already seen in demos, previews, and trailers.
Hey Alex.
We basically are not allowed to show you anything from the end game, which is also a little frustrating because if you've played a Monster Hunter game before, you know that the main game is basically just a tutorial for the actual game, which is the end game.
Yeah.
And we're not allowed to talk about any of that endgame stuff. So I won't, but I will hint at it. I won't spoil anything, of course, but I'll talk vaguely to not upset the Capcom overlords, okay? Don't worry, it's nothing scandalous. It's mainly just that they have some big reveals and really cool stuff they don't want to spoil, which will be spoiled if you talk about the endgame at all. So I get it, but I just want to be clear. That's why you're not going to see like
Thank you for the follow. Welcome.
or anything. But having gone through all of that stuff, let's just get into the actual game. Monster Hunter Wilds is an attempt to expand on the foundation laid out in World and then also add some of the refinements that they introduced with Monster Hunter Rise when it first launched on the Switch. But if I had to pick a single word that describes all of the things they're trying to do in Monster Hunter Wilds, it's to simply say that they are trying to make this game dynamic. Everything from the weather systems to monsters' schedules tying to different behaviors, fight styles, and even their spawning all introduce a new level of dynamism into moment-to-moment gameplay. Some monsters only appear during specific conditions such as nighttime or inclement weather or both. And while you can go to a pop-up camp that you've built or back to a base camp and rest, cycling the in-game day-night cycle and weather systems to where you want it to be. You can say, I want to rest until it's nighttime and it's inclement weather or whatever. You can do that, but it costs 300 research points, which is a good amount, especially early in the game. So it's pretty clear they don't want you doing that, at least not.
Hey, really? Interesting.
Frequently, as far as I can tell. And so I think what they're aiming for is a situation where you are playing the game, you need to go up against this monster, but he hasn't spawned yet because the conditions aren't right. And so you go and you do something else. You go hunt a different monster that fits more with what the current situation is. And because of how they've reorganized the questing system, you're able to just go explore the level, find a monster, and create a quest in that moment for that monster without having to go back, loading to a separate area,
Shut the fuck up.
cooking there. Instead, now all of that is in the map itself. If you want to cook, cool. You just cook while you're out and about in the hunt. You want to create a new quest? Cool. You do that right here, right now. And so it's pretty clear that they want you to stay playing the actual game much more than spending time in a base camp with busy work, managing your inventory loadouts, and doing those types of tedious activities. Furthermore, the secret mounts play a central role. They not only carry the player, but also secondary weapons that you can swap to.
I'm not gonna even, like, the only thing I'm gonna use for the secondary weapon is just another heavy bow gun with a different element on it, you know?
Meaning if you want to have a great sword and then also a ranged weapon, you can
Just a
do
ranged
that,
weapon.
simply
That's it.
swapping between
It's
the
kind of, this
weapons
mechanic's kind of
by
useless to
hopping
me,
on
to be honest.
secret, pressing right on the D-pad and grabbing the new weapon before jumping off and using it. For me personally, I didn't use this much because I am sort of like a loadout snob. I create like 15 or 20 different loadouts for each specific monster.
Yeah.
Which is maybe overkill, but as a result, I have weapons that are specifically tailored to each individual monster, so I don't really find myself needing to swap back and forth.
Yeah.
However, some late game monsters, which I'm not allowed to show you, do have attacks that create weak points in hard to reach areas that are high up on their bodies, like on the peak of their back. And you
that's fine.
typically be able to reach this with, say, a great sword. So perhaps it makes more sense to also carry a ranged weapon with you so you can quickly swap.
Nah,
to
I'm
that
good.
once
I
the
just have a
game's
ranged
revving
weapon all
up
the
for that
time.
big attack, and then you can shoot that weak point for extra damage, something that you wouldn't have been able to do at all if you were just playing with one weapon. And I think this is cool. I also think it's intended to encourage players to experiment with multiple weapons.
No.
Across the game,
No.
or certainly in the end game,
No.
where you might have a great sword, or maybe
No.
you're somebody that specializes in the long sword
No.
or the insect glaive or
Nope.
something like that, and they want you to swap back and forth
Nope.
between the two.
No.
That's cool. I like the idea of that, but personally for me, I tend to stick with what I know and really like, and then I might
Same.
branch out and try a great sword here and
No.
there, or try a hammer or this or that.
The only time I ever touch other weapons or so is in the arena. That's it. Only in the arena is the only time I ever touch weapons that are different from heavy bow guns.
Sure, some people are going to love it, but I actually didn't find myself using the weapon swapping very often at all. But going back to the weak points I just mentioned, this is something that the entire game has been built around, it seems. When you're hunting a monster and you specifically target one part of their body, like let's say the back right paw, you can expect there to be wounds that open up and begin glowing, signaling a weak point. However, they only glow when you are holding down the focus button, which is left trigger or L2 on a PlayStation controller, or something else on mouse and keyboard. I don't play Monster on a mouse and keyboard, but you know, you do you if you happen to.
I know. Who the fuck plays Monster Hunter mouse and keyboard, bro? Get the fuck out of here.
You're more talented than me. But
That's
once you've
just
done
weird.
This, you'll see the weak points highlighted, and then you can
That's just
either
weird,
continue
bro.
attacking
That's
them
just
to break
fucking
them,
weird.
Or you can use a specialized attack for your given weapon that breaks these wounds. Doing so also tends to stun the monster, opening up for even further attacks and opening of new wounds. This is similar to what a lot of Monster Hunter veterans
Me,
would
no
be
cap, you're
familiar
weird.
with, which of course is to just target like the tail until you chop the tail off. But in this case, it's much more, I think, fluid, because it's not specific to just one breakable area. It's actually specific to where you're dealing damage. If you're dealing damage specifically to like the collarbone
Serves him
on
right.
a dragon, that's where the weak point will show up, and then you can break that because that's where you've been focusing the damage. Makes sense, you know, it's pretty intuitive. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that if you want to create a loadout that specifically is enhanced to take advantage of these types of wounds, you can do that pretty easily.
Okay,
and that
that's
is,
cool.
after all, what I think a lot
Thank
of
you
people
for the
love about
follow.
Monster Hunter is the idea that you can find one particular niche within the game's gameplay systems, and then you can become the master of that niche. If you want to build a loadout that is just about farming crits, like, you can do that. If you want to build a loadout that's just about tanking heavy damage, and then you got earplugs in so no tremors or yells or shouts, you know, bother you, you can do all of that. There's tons of cool things like that available to players in old games and also in this one.
Yeah, of course.
Perhaps
That's-
the biggest
that's
and
the
most
same.
noticeable improvement has been the map, though. This 3D map is a godsend from Mount Capcom. I don't even know how we ever put up with the old map. In World, for example, they had this really convoluted two-dimensional map that you would flip pages between for different levels of height within areas like the ancient forest. And after a while, you sort of were able to figure it out, but it was so convoluted and difficult to read, especially at first. It was not that useful.
Yeah, I can kind of get a little bit.
But this new three-dimensional map is fantastic. It's oh man, I love it. They've also really fine-tuned the control of it since the demo. When they first dropped the demo, it was really tough to actually navigate on the map and to like move and pan across it where you wanted to. But in this final version of the game that we've been playing, or close to final version, it's way better and way easier to control.
Okay,
I
that's
love
cool.
this thing, and it's going to make it really tough to go back to the older games because it's so much better. It's so good. They've also overhauled environments. All of the hunting grounds have their own weather inclemency. They all have their own day-night cycle for you to engage with, and monster behaviors are impacted by all of this. There are certain monsters in the late game that you may need to grind for armor or weapon sets that are of a very high, let's just say, rarity or rank. You know, again, I'm trying to be coy, but some of these monsters just straight up won't spawn unless it's a very specific situation, unless the weather is like X and the time of day is Y. They just won't spawn. And even then, you might have to occasionally open up the map, check the environmental details, see if that monster happens to be roaming around, or if they're going to be roaming around soon, because you can see if they're coming in the next handful of hours. And then you can plan around that. This may sound like a headache, and at times it is, because you may want to just hunt a very specific monster and you simply can't because he's not available.
Yeah.
But the game does have systems available to players if you are so inclined. If you want to create an investigation for a given monster, you just do that, and then you have a handful of attempts to go and fight them and grind them out.
Okay.
And then you create a new investigation when another one spawns. So there are solutions to this. It just takes a little bit of know-how and forethought on the player's part to make sure that they set up these investigations.
Okay, so
before
bounties, they have that
monster
kind of bounty
spawns.
investigation
And listen,
things?
there are a
Okay.
lot of other things that they've tweaked. They've added like NPC guys that you can SOS to come and help you fight. They've added like tons of different things, and there's no way I could go through all of them in a review like this. But what I will say is the things that they've added, I've really liked. The things that they've tweaked, I really happen to like. Even smaller things that people will take for granted are significant improvements, like the ability to write on your secret and be able to use the hook sling to go and grab crafting materials or herbs or honey or whatever else while you're writing. So you don't have to awkwardly ride 10 feet, hop off, pick up a couple of flowers, hop back on your mount, and then keep riding until you do it again. The game is smooth throughout. It's just designed to be fluid as a new player to Monster Hunter or as a veteran.
Not for Asmongold. Not for Asmongold.
I really appreciate that. And all of the other side activities you would expect to see, whether that's side quests themselves or things like fishing, are here. But even if you want to just stick to the core gameplay loop of Monster Hunter and just grind monsters for better loot, better gear to take on bigger and badder monsters and prepare for the expansion that's inevitably coming, you can do that. And the varied maps and different monsters available to you will certainly keep you busy. I was surprised the maps weren't bigger, especially some of the later game maps are actually much smaller than you might expect. Especially
Interesting.
when this was pitched as like this massive wilds game, you know, it was going to be massive
Really?
and all interconnected. But honestly, you end up playing it extremely similarly to Monster Hunter World. It doesn't actually play that differently in terms of like the level design and how they've structured things, which is fine. I mean, I loved World,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, but I was surprised that it wasn't as much of an overhaul in terms of the environment design as I was expecting. Some things, such as the sand pits that open up and can swallow you when fighting certain monsters within the desert area of the first map, are really cool, and I like those dynamics that can shake up an encounter. But there's not many of these significant dynamic things within the level design themselves. There are certain moments where maybe you can interact with a boulder, pull it down, and it deals damage to the monster beneath it, as you would expect with environmental hazards, as has been in Monster Hunter for a while. But all of this to say, the early game areas are certainly much bigger, and I think a lot more focus was put on those compared to the later game areas, which become much more lean, which I can again understand. You know, you got to front load a lot of the larger stuff to keep players engaged in those early hours when you're trying to convince them to keep playing. But it was surprising the game wasn't physically bigger in terms of layout. By the time I reached hour 60, for example, I knew every corner of these maps like the back of my hand, and that's to be expected when you're playing a game like Monster Hunter, but I still was kind of disappointed that there weren't more secrets or surprises to be found. But who knows, maybe there are secrets and surprises to be found and I just simply haven't found them. But to wrap up all of this, I love Monster Hunter Wilds. I think the game is really, really good, and I cannot wait to keep playing it. During this review period, I was not able to play with my friends or family. Of course, it's a review period. So I pretty much played through the vast majority of the game solo, which is fine. I still love the game, even solo. But this is one of those games that's even better with your friends, even better with family playing with you. And I cannot wait to play more of it with them, which I think is really high praise, because there's not many games that you would put 60, 70, 80 hours into and still want to play more and start over. Like, that's not that common. And so I just want to be clear, I love this game and I cannot wait to dig into it even more. That being said, this is the part of the video where I have to get into some of the less fun things
Here we
to
go.
talk about.
Here we
some
go.
of the bad.
This is the most
ugly
important
stuff
thing right
about
here.
Monster Hunter Wilds, because it is far from a perfect game. The first thing is the performance. If you played the demo or betas or anything, you'll know that this is a massive problem. They also released a benchmark app that you can download on Steam to see how the game will run for you. And I'm sorry to say that it just frankly is not well optimized at all. I play
Oh, jeez. Well, that's a bit of a problem. You know what? You know what the worst part about it too as well? It's literally from like what 14 minutes all the way to 20 minutes of performance issues. That's like 6 minutes of conversation of literally of how bad the performance is. So, ooh, this is definitely not good.
most of these games for review on 3 systems, at least, if I'm playing on PC, and that is on my supercomputer gaming PC over here with a 4090 in it, a 7950 X3D whatever CPU in it, 128 gigs of RAM. The game's running on an M.2 SSD.
About here I come. Gotta pray for a god tier day 1 patch. Oh my god, dude. I'm so worried about this game.
Like, you name it, this thing probably has it. And then I also run it on my gaming laptop, which has a 3070 on it, to get an idea of more average gaming PC hardware, at least according to the Steam survey. That's the most common GPU as far as I'm aware, so we tested on that. And then I also tested on my ROG Ally. And across the board, the game runs pretty rough. Running on high settings on my supercomputer, medium on my laptop, and obviously low on the ROG Ally, the game consistently struggled to maintain 60 frames and often was dipping into the 40s and 50s. That is with upscalers turned on. That's right, on my supercomputer, if I do not have frame generation turned on, but I have DLSS on balanced mode, not even quality mode, balanced mode, the game struggles to maintain 60 frames, dipping into the 50s, sometimes the 40s, and even lower in specific instances in the later game areas against like big bosses. And that's just so insane to me that in 2025, the year of our Lord Todd Howard, we would still be having massive technical problems like this. It's crazy to me. Like, we just had Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which showed you can have an optimized PC release, but here we are with Monster Hunter and it runs like garbage. I'm knocking on all the wood I possibly can get. I hope that the day 1 patch fixes a lot of this, but I don't know if it will. All I can do is report on the version of the game that I played, and the version of the game that I played ran like hot donkey ass. I hate to say it, but that's what it is. If you turn on frame generation, which is basically mandated in a game like this in order to get consistent frames above 60, you can expect there to be massive artifacting and other such issues that come along with frame generation. Latency is not that big of a deal this time around, thankfully, but I did notice that there was all sorts of artifacting and ghosting that would happen around text and UI elements when you turned on frame generation, which is really, really distracting and disappointing. But I hear you, Luke. I'm just gonna turn on VRR. I don't mind inconsistent frame times. I'll be good. Honestly, that's a fair point. Some people can just do that and they don't mind it. Fair point, honestly. But one thing I can't just hand wave away, and that you also will not be able to hand wave away, are crashes. And unfortunately, across the gamut of PC devices that I tested this game on, there were sometimes like very repeatable crashes that would
Asian dev shaking my head, Western dev still superior. What are you talking about?
happen, specifically when crafting Palico armor in certain base camps in later game areas. I don't know why that would be, but for some reason in those areas, whenever you would craft Palico equipment, it would cause the game to tank down into the single-digit frames and then just die. Like, it was weird. It happened on my big PC. It happened on my gaming laptop. I don't know why. It's well above my pay grade to know. But other than that, there were also just random crashes that would happen while trying to set up quests in certain areas of the game, and then also random crashes that would happen even during cutscenes, which was weird. And I don't know why this is. It would just crash and then generate a crash report. It would send it off to Capcom, and that was that. But again, it's just really frustrating to have a game that just gives out randomly, and it's lame. It's lame to see. I will say, however, it does sound like a good number of patches and fixes are coming on the day one patch or with it. So I am hoping at least the crashes will be fixed by launch day. But again, my policy tends to be, if I ran into something, I'm going to tell you about it, because I don't know for a fact that they're going to fix it on day one. I've trusted publishers before when they've said, yeah, we're totally fixing that, and then they just don't. So I just don't take anything for granted anymore. I will tell you what I saw while playing it, and if I'm able to show you it, I'll show you it. But at the very least, I hope that they do fix it in the day one patch and it's not a problem for you. But I just had to tell you that I ran into it. But perhaps the most infuriating technical problem I had was a graphical glitch that happened across different devices. Across drivers, I reinstalled drivers, did the drivers they recommended, then they updated them. I tried everything I could to fix this and it didn't. And I'm gonna show it to you, but with a blurred out, censored, basically version of what's on screen, just so nobody can accuse me of spoiling anything. But this is it. And I'm gonna hit play just so you can see what it's doing on screen. I'm not gonna show you like actual gameplay of this area or anything, but I wanna demonstrate to you how distracting this is. Okay, so this is paused, but then I hit play. This is what it's doing to my screen while I'm trying to hunt a monster. Wee bit distracting. I have no idea what this is. I called it a vortex problem, and based on my notes as I played through the game, I ran into this 6 separate times. Jesus. And it was specifically when fighting high rank monsters that were like pretty high stakes fights, and this would get so bad that I just couldn't continue. So I'd have to get to a pause in the fight, and weirdly the only thing I found that would fix it for about 5 minutes at a time was to go into the beta and change the mesh quality in the graphics settings from high to medium or from medium back up to high, and then it would fix itself like it was loading in new meshes, and then it was fine. But other than that, I have no idea what's causing this or what the deal is. I don't know if other people have run into it, but it's really frustrating and made the game basically unplayable. Thankfully, when I hard rebooted the game and everything, it would go away and then creep up another handful of hours later, but it was a consistent problem across different in-game areas, monsters. It's just a weird thing that would happen. So there you go. But that's enough about the technical side of things. We've beat that monster to death enough already. I want to now touch on 2 things that left me a little underwhelmed when it comes to Monster Hunter Wilds, and then we're going to wrap this up. And the first thing has to do with a pretty major shift in direction that they've taken with this game, and that is an intense focus on the narrative. If you played through the demo / beta, you'll be familiar with what they're doing here, but basically they have overhauled all of the cutscenes. They've added a ton of new NPCs. Everybody's voice acted. They have some pretty intense scenes where the actors are acting their hearts out, certainly, and even the player character engages in a lot of dialogue within these cutscenes. Now, I only got into Monster Hunter with Monster Hunter World. My buddy Corey was a big fan of the games going back years and years and years. He got me into them and I love them dearly, but I got into it relatively recently. And so bear that in mind when I say this, which is just that as far as I can tell, like most people play Monster Hunter for the monster hunting. Yeah. Not for the story. Yeah. Like the story in Monster Hunter games is always something that's just happening to excuse why you're hunting monsters. Yeah. And that's about it. Nobody really is playing these games for the story. Like I've never met somebody in chat on streams or anything who's like, I love Monster Hunter
more basically more frame drops.
But I love the stories. Nobody has ever in the history of humanity said that.
Yeah, of course.
I think they're trying to change that with this, and maybe they're trying to appeal to a new audience that likes narrative stuff that maybe didn't play Monster Hunter because it was lacking that. I don't know. But it just really lands flat. I mean, they put a lot of effort into it with Wilds, and frankly, it just doesn't pay off for me. The characters are really dry. The dialogue is dry as a desert and quite boring.
Yikes.
I mean, the actors are doing their best, but there's just only so much you can work with here. And for me, it just fell totally flat. I like stories in games that also have great gameplay systems, but in this case, the story was just something that I felt was in the way of what I actually wanted to do. Like old school Assassin's Creed games when you're like, ooh, Black Flag, I want to be a pirate. oh, I've got to walk through Abstergo and I've got to walk to my desk in the real world. Like, nobody wants to do that. They want to be a pirate. Let me be a pirate. That's what I want to do here. I want to hunt monsters. Let me hunt monsters.
For mint
Why are we
picking.
talking about our fifis? And maybe in this same vein as trying to appeal to a new audience, perhaps the most interesting revelation in my time with Monster Hunter Wilds is thus. And that is that the game was shockingly easy. And listen, throughout this entire video, you've been watching my gameplay. I'm not good at these games. I'm not talented. I am not skilled. I'm just a loser who's sitting in a basement who likes playing Monster Hunter games, okay? I like them even though I'm not particularly good at them. And even so, I found this game to be shockingly straightforward and easy. And listen, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or be like, ooh, get on my level. I'm just saying there are certain things we can look at in terms of difficulty and challenge over the course of somebody's time with the game. At this point, I've played 78-ish hours of Monster Hunter Wilds, and I have not failed a quest. I have not been downed or fainted 3 times, in effect, within a single mission. And my average completion time with optional hunts at high rank has been under 15 minutes. Like, that's not that much, especially they're giving you on average between like 30 and 50 minutes for these hunts, and my average time is under 15. I don't know what the deal is. I just have found this game to be shockingly straightforward and easy to play, at least so far. Granted, I tend to be like kind of hyper obsessive with loadout creation and creating loadouts specific for individual monsters, looking in the monsters field guide to make sure I can.
Luke is better than me and Dark. We got blasted in the beta.
Figure out what type of elemental damage they're weak to and they're vulnerable to, and then trying to build a loadout specific for that monster. And then I go and engage in those hunts repeatedly. So granted, I'm like trying to min-max and make sure that my build is perfect for each individual hunt. But even then, like, it doesn't change the fact that I kind of suck at these games, and I'm still finding myself waltzing through the entire game, which was just surprising to me because I went back and looked at some of my footage for Monster Hunter World, and I regularly was going into some of those fights at like 30, 40, 50 minutes right on the edge before the timer runs out, trying to finish the hunt against the Anjanath or whatever. And it was just part of how that game was. It was very, very challenging. But this time around, it's been shockingly easy to play. But to be perfectly clear and fair, there is a good chance that a lot of this is different by the time you play it. One of the biggest and most ambiguous patch notes that are expected for the day 1 patch is simply a line item that says balancing fixes, which can mean anything, but it could mean boosting the HP of monsters across the board. Maybe they kept them low for us during reviews so we'd have an easier time getting through the game. Who knows? Maybe they're gonna make monsters even easier at launch or whatever they end up doing, but this is something that they can change relatively easily through patches and stuff. But again, all I can do is report on what I have seen and what I experienced, and for me, Monster Hunter Wilds, for whatever reason, was way easier, I feel, than Monster Hunter World was. And even then, like, I feel like it was a good bit easier than even...
I heard other CCs, they say it's easy too, but it might because it's just a reviewer copy, so they make it easy for you to grab footage clips. Could be. It could be, actually.
Rise was at times, which is just surprising. But all of this to say, I still love Monster Hunter Wilds. It's not a perfect game technically, and the fact that it runs so poorly is a huge bummer. I mean, when you boot the game up for the first time, one of the first things it asks you is whether or not you would like to turn on frame generation. Like, that's one of the first things they prompt you for in the game. And that is like an immediate red flag for performance. Where's my, I have it right here. That's an immediate like, oh, do you hear the people singing red flag? Because if they're asking you immediately, do you want to turn this thing on to like artificially inflate your frames and make it run better, that should tell you performance is not going to be great. And in this case, it really isn't. So the performance is a major bummer and holdback. I hope they fix the crashes, and I hope they fix the vortex of death glitch and bug or whatever the hell is happening that I found consistently throughout the game. I hope they fix that stuff. And once they do that, I hope they balance it to make it a little bit more challenging. The end game, which of course I can't really talk about, does offer some more challenge and some more interesting things to shake it up. Again, I'm frustrated I have to be so vague, but the end game does have some more challenge that makes it more interesting. But even the base game, I remember being more challenging than this was with World and Rise, and so it's just surprising to see how easy it was to get through. But all of that set aside, and you know, ignoring the story because most people probably will, I still loved Monster Hunter Wilds. I can't wait to continue playing more, and at the end of the day, like, most of my frustrations with it are that I want more of it, and I want more of it to be challenging so I can justify spending more time playing it. And that's a good problem to have with a video game. For you to spend over 70 hours in it and just want to play more. Like, that is a good thing to have people saying about your game. I hope that they continue to patch it and improve performance. Other things like multiplayer is certainly going to add a lot more fun for a lot of people, and I'm sure that's going to be awesome to see. And I can't wait to see what happens as the months go by and the game just gets better and better and people start to discover new strats and new builds and all sorts of stuff. I can't wait. But for me right now, I would recommend, if you're going to play on PC as I did, that you go and download the benchmark tool that they have, see how the game is going to run on your system, and then decide from there if you want to get it with that performance. If you can tolerate the performance that's spat out by the benchmark, then go for it, download the game, have a great time. It really is tremendous, and I think
Oh, this isn't good.
As I did. Just be ready for maybe some clunk, especially towards the end. But all that to say, I'm happy to confirm that Capcom's done it again, and Monster Hunter is still awesome. So
Okay.
go team. But speaking of team, me and my team have put together a weekly newsletter, a brand new thing that we are doing. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on the gaming industry once a week, including a recap of gaming news and all sorts of other stuff, just go down to the link in the description box below or in the pinned comment, go to it, put your email in, boom, locked and loaded, you're subscribed. It's free. There's nothing else tied to it.
The
It's just something
prize
we're
for
trying
appealing to
like,
general
increase
audience.
engagement, frankly, with you guys, and to be able to talk to you more and interact with you more. So if you're interested, check it out. Links below. Again, pinned comment, description. You'll see it down.
Yikes. 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 Oh no. The performance is going to be dog shit, which is very unfortunate, to be honest. Not surprised at all. I'm hoping that the day one patch literally fixes the issue. Please, for the love of God, man. I cannot afford for a new GPU, man. God, when I'm trying to save up for a VTuber model and then you have some of these games that are not optimized. Oh well. Well, yeah, it's to be expected, but I'm hoping it fixes at least, but we'll see what happens on day one. So thank you for the follow as well. Welcome. Anyways, that's the end of the video. You guys can comment, like, subscribe, do all that fancy jazzy stuff. Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm pretty concerned indeed, to be honest, but well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens indeed.